Let me first give my spiel, the truth behind this, okay? My article that I wrote, and if you didn't, little printer problem, so if you didn't get it, just let me know and we'll make sure we get it to you, all right? I print it out from the smaller one. But anyways, it was about money, and the title of it was Money, 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 Money. Some of y'all know that song, Got to Have It. Money, money, money. The OJs, right? The love of money, right? And as I read the Bible, I just like y'all, all right? I am flesh and blood just like y'all. And as I read the Bible and I read the scriptures, they sometimes work on me. Oftentimes they work on me. If they don't work on me, then something's wrong, all right? Anyways, man, I get to doing some reading and over Matthew and other passages, and money came up. And I had already talked to Brother Charles about some of this stuff before. And I said, man, I think about money a lot, okay? I'm just being honest with you, okay? And I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to be honest with you, okay? And you probably do the same thing, too. That's why I ain't stunting none one of y'all. But anyways, I did. And I started looking at this and just how much time that you can dedicate to something and others right there. And I said, man, I got to constantly do better. It's not that you cannot think about money. It's not that you don't have to work and do other things like that. But it's that constant, almost anxiety, if you will, or worry, if you will, about things in which God has already promised us and things in which he's told us to be content with, all right? So that's the truth about it, and that's what this morning's lesson is, where is my treasure? And tonight we're going to be talking about who is really rich, all right? Taking one of the parables. But anyways, our sermon text is Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 24. Now, I have two objectives. Number one, to show this world's treasure versus heavenly treasure. And that's going to make a whole lot more sense when we read our sermon text. But to show this world's treasure, what does this world offer in comparison to that which we have in that celestial abode, that which we have in heaven, and setting up and storing up, those things in heaven, like he will say. And number two, as we'll see from the text, to show what spiritual vision looks like. Now, I might not get to all of this today, but we'll pin a penknife in it and pick it up the next time. All right, what did I say? Matthew chapter 6. Did I say, what verse did I say? Verse 19, okay. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy. Literally, that word rust means worms. Okay, I'll explain it in the context. But he says, do not lay up for yourselves treasure on earth where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust, idea of worms, destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. Verse 21, for where your treasure, highlight, underline, is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? He's talking about spiritual things here. Don't get confused with just the physical eye. Verse 24. No one or no man can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God in mammon, money, material wealth, or possessions, right? Now let's take our time and make sure we get what he's really saying and keep some things in his context. First things first, Jesus is not against wealth or savings, and we know that. You can be wealthy and you can and have plenty and still be pleasing to God, because we remember Job, right? A man that was upright, that skeweth evil, perfect in his ways, the scripture says. So Jesus is not against wealth or savings. He's talking about the way we oftentimes allow money issues or money matters to get in the way of what's really important. He's talking about things that cause us to detour in this Christian race. That's what he's talking about. And sometimes we detour so much off the road that it's hard to get back on the beaten path. Sometimes we can put ourselves in these situations to where we constantly have to do this. And so what we're trying to do is learn from the scriptures and how to avoid that. And if we're in that situation, how to get out of it. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 7, for we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain that we can carry nothing out. Now let that think. We're going to deal with 1 Timothy 6 tonight, and we're going to deal with that a lot with contentment if the good Lord says the same. All right? But here's a fundamental principle, and we all know it. King Tut his body and his tomb has been exhumed from the grave, has it not? And you can go every so often, they bring that exhibit and they take it to museum after museum after museum and make money off of him. All the honey, all the gold, and all the other stuff that he was dyed with, somebody else at the Smithsonian Museum is making money off of him. Ain't that something? So let's think about what Paul is telling Timothy. We brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. What's Jesus' focus? I want you to have spiritual vision. I want your eyes to be clearly gazed on spiritual things, on heavenly things. Jesus desires for us to have 20/20 spiritual vision and not allow earthly things to cloud our vision. One of the things I said in my article that I wrote how we emphasize as parents a good education so you can go out and make a good what? Living. We don't want you to just make anything. We want you to make a good living. I want you to be able to take care of your daddy in his old age. Amen. Send your daddy on some vacation, kids. I have 5 of them. Every couple of months, I'm switching it up. That's right. That's the goal. That's what we want. But more than anything, like John says, I have no greater joy to know that my children are faithful. That's what John says. That's what we want. And Jesus is trying to get us to realize that our life is but a what? Vapor. It appears for a little bit and then it vanishes away. And so the things in which we should emphasize the most are that which is spiritual. Now let's go back to our text and let's take this verse by verse in Matthew chapter 6 and verse number 19. Did I put that up there? I think I did. All right. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures. Keyword, underline that because we're going to come back to it when we read Luke. On earth, where moth and rust or worm destroy, thieves break in and steal. Let's get the immediate context. More than likely, this is talking about tapestries, clothing, and other things like that. You remember how your mom and them or grandmama put out mothballs? Y'all still put out mothballs? They stink. They stink bad. But you put out mothballs. We always put out mothballs, keep a little silver fish. What do you call them, silver fish or silver dollar fish? You know what I'm talking about? They get in there in your closet and stuff like that. Or you keep them on the outside to keep the little rodents and stuff away. And then you know what else? You got all these clothes and stuff, and you put them in your closet, and you got all these things right here. He's saying, do not lay up for yourselves treasure on earth where moth and rust destroy, and thieves break in and steal. That word lay up, it means to gather, to heap up, to store up. The idea is talking about this accumulating all of these different things, kind of like what Naaman did in Joshua 1:7. That's another time that you see it. He took those things in the battle of Ai or Ai in Joshua chapter, I think it's 7 verse 1 or somewhere in there, 1 verse Joshua and Achan. But anyways, that's the idea that you see, to accumulate these riches, to keep in store and to store up in reserve. But let's get the context and let's see if we can't make some application. So, don't take offense at this. I'll just use myself as an example. How about that? I have a lot of clothes in my closet. Clothes when I was a size, I don't want to lie, maybe 36, probably 38. Okay, let's just be honest. And anyways, there's all this stuff here, and then there's shirts, and then there's ties, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. And in my mind, well, I'm going to get back to that size. Hamburger. How many of us keep telling ourselves we're gonna shed that weight? This new year, I'm going to get in the gym, and I'm going to get back to my size 4. Line. Ain't going to happen. Ain't going to happen. Ain't going to happen. It can, but church's chicken still tastes good, right? And you're going to have to make a whole lot of sacrifices. Well, what's the point? I'm storing up all this stuff, and I'm accumulating it, but I could be giving it to someone else. There's someone else that could be presently using these things right there. They could be of some effect. I could use them, and prayerfully a door of opportunity could open so that I could teach the gospel to someone, so that I can edify, build up, or use someone. So that's really the idea of it, where this moth or this worm destroys and thieves break in and steal, all right? So as long as you and I are stockpiling things for later use, such as clothing or fabrics, tapestries, and other goods, there will always be the threat of moth or worms and thieves. There's no real peace in these material possessions, because some pestilence or somebody could take it away from us. So the emphasis is, since that's the case, how much more so should I store up treasure in heaven? Now let's get the context a little bit better in Luke chapter number 12. Luke chapter number 12, and let's start at verse 13. Luke chapter 12 and start at verse 13. Someone in the crowd said to him, Rabbi or teacher, Luke chapter 12, verse 13. I hear some pages flipping, so let me slow down. Luke chapter 12 and verse number 13. Someone in the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. But he said to him, Man, who made me a judge or an arbitrator over you? And he said to them, Take care and be on guard against all covetousness. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possession. We already read how Paul said you could take nothing with you when you die. It is certain. Verse 16. Excuse me. And he told them a parable saying, The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grains and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, Fool, this night your soul is required of you, that which matters most. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be? Most likely some people you don't like. So is the one who lays up, there is the word again, who lays up what? Treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. So this is what he's teaching. If more than anything, we need to be rich toward God and not towards these material earthly things which are going to perish. And if we spend first-rate energy on second-rate things, then we just missed the mark. That's the point. But how easy is it to do? Man, there's always something new, is it not? There's always some advertisement that's saying, man, I got to have it. Oh, man, when I get this one particular thing, I'm going to be so happy. If I have the latest phone, then it'll make me feel. If I get these shoes, man, it's going to be so. If I get this hairdo, if I get this, you fill in the blank. If I get this particular rifle, this gun. Oh, if I could just buy this land, oh, it'll be so great. There's always something. But at the end, you can't take it with you. And we as Christians should be using the earth's riches to ultimately bring glory to God. But there's nothing wrong with having things, but we got to keep a spiritual focus on it. All right, let's get to the next verse, verse 20. And then we'll compare these two verses together. He says, do not lay up for yourself treasure on earth. That's verse 19. But notice the difference. Verse 20. But lay up for yourselves treasures where? In heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. So Jesus is drawing a parallel, is he not? If you're going to have treasure, lay it up, store it up, gather it up in heaven. Nehemiah said, you've heard me quote this many times, remember me, oh my God, for the good that I have done, right? Even Paul, in writing to Philemon, would joke about Onesimus, the runaway slave. You remember that? It's only a one-chapter book. And do you remember how he would say, even not to mention you yourselves owe me your soul? In other words, Paul was the one who taught him the gospel. My point is, God takes note of the good deeds in which we do. Faith without works is what? Dead, right? So remember what Jesus says, this person that gives a cup of cold water He's not going to forget that, right? When we see this person that's lamed or hungry, and we tend to them, the Lord takes note of those things. So we lay up for ourselves treasures in heaven. I'm not saying that you can meritoriously earn your salvation. I'm not, but I am saying faith without works is dead. All right. So he's putting the emphasis on heaven. Note, there is absolute security in storing up heavenly wealth. There's absolute security in that. Do y'all remember, was the company MCI? It was out of Houston, or was it Enron? It was Enron, right? And Enron, they had a documentary on it. And it's a sad, sad state of affairs. We all know what happened, but they interviewed the people. And there was this one particular woman, and I can remember sitting down, and you could just see her gasping, just crying, just trying to get it. She's like, I just don't know what to do. I just don't know. I'm old. I don't have this and this right here, and it's all gone. And it was, you could look at her, and the way she looked was like a hopeless woman. How sad. How sad. Now, I'm not saying that even as a Christian that wouldn't affect us in some way or another. I'm not going to sit up here and say that. But ultimately, I know that all hope is not lost, because I'm looking forward to a abode that's builder and maker does not have these earthly hands. I'm looking forward to that which is better, that heavenly abode, that celestial abode. So Jesus, again, there's absolute security in storing up heavenly wealth, which is simply not the case with earthly treasure. It's just not the case. There is no such thing as you can get all the security systems you want. They can still break it down. You can get, there's no two ways about it. The only peace that passes all understanding is found in Christ Jesus. And Isaiah chapter 51 verse 8, for the moth will eat them up like a garment, and the worm will eat them like wool. But my righteousness will be forever, and my salvation to all generations. What's the point? Put a premium on spiritual things. Sometimes, many of us, well, it's starting to be less and less. Used to be a lot of men were workaholics. You understand? Remember what I'm talking about? Top to bottom, sun up to sundown, work. And in my mind, that's coming up, my dad, and I love him to death, all right? He's still living. He worked a lot. He worked split rotating shifts, y'all remember, right? And he would get as much overtime as he could get. And you got to understand, he's providing for him, so rightfully so. He ain't working hard. But sometimes we have to ask ourselves, if I chose to have a little less here, could it free up more time for me here, and I did not have to make this money? Do you see it? In other words, I can enjoy, I can have more time if I choose. We all make decisions. We all get the same 24 hours. But we go out here, and you understand exactly where I'm coming from. The ultimate thing we're trying to see is spiritual vision, righteousness, and what God offers is eternal, and that's salvation. Earthly things, they pass away. Let's look at James chapter 4 real quick, all right? How are we doing? We only got 2 verses in this text. It's going to be 6 hours. No, I ain't going to be that long. What did I say? James chapter 4? Yes. Really, it's chapter 5, but we need to get the context. The Lord's half-brother and what he starts to say. Now, let's look at verse 13. Come now, you who say today or tomorrow, we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? It is as a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. Verse 17. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. Chapter 5. Watch it. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and the corrosion will be evidence against you and will eat your flesh like fire. You have laid up, there it is again, treasure in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your field, which you kept back by fraud, and crying out against you, and the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord. You have lied on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the righteous person. He does not resist you. Think about that rich fool who has all these things, and he goes out and builds bigger barns. Remember, the purpose of our possessions is to provide for our family, no doubt, but to give to those that are in need, to help that other person, that person that we come across that's in need. Going back to what Paul tells let him who stole steal no more, but let him rather labor with his hands, all right, providing so he can give to others, all right. So again, let's emphasize this. Jesus is emphasizing treasure on earth versus treasure in heaven. That's what he's emphasizing. Treasure on earth compared to the treasure that's in heaven. One is temporal and fleeting and passing away, and you do not know what tomorrow holds, even if it will be tomorrow like this. But one constant that we do know is God, and where he's at is in heaven. So do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, but rather lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. That's the emphasis that Jesus is trying to get you and I to focus on and to see, all right? Now, let's look at this, and we'll get Revelation. You can go ahead and turn to Revelation, I believe 21. Jesus is contrasting physical with spiritual, the expectation of earthly things and the worry that comes with them. You know, one of the things, you know, Cowboy fans is high and happy right now, boy. They done won a game or two and everything's great. And I said this before about their owner, Jerry Jones, when he first made his $1 billion. They talked to him about his $1 billion and making $1 billion and joining this club, yada, 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 yada. And you know the one thing that he was worried about? Losing it. Losing it. So you can have all those things and all that money and still not have a peace. The great, he's not a great, but he was known for, he was a drug lord or he was the insurance guy, either one of them. But he would have, every night he would have people with guns watch him sleep at night. He had all this money. He had all these things. I forget his name, but he was either a big drug lord or he's the guy that pretty much where we get the idea of insurance from. But anyways, every night he'd have people constantly around him. Couldn't have a good night's sleep because he always thought someone was gunning for him. And he would have this one. It's just unbelievable when you look at it. Jesus is trying to get us to see that if you're going to put your focus on these things, there's going to be a lot of worry that comes with this and trying to keep it versus the heavenly. Nothing but good in heaven, nothing that alarms, no worry, in other words. In this world, there is always the threat of danger, but not that which is to come. Now, let's get our text, Revelation, chapter number 21, I believe. What, did I put it up there? I did. Now let's start at verse 1. He says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more." The idea of separation there. Verse 2. "And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them as their God." Watch verse 4, talking about heaven. "He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore. For the former things has passed away. And he who was seated on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new. And he said, Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And he said to me, It is done. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give from the springs of the water of life without payment. The one who conquers will have this heritage, the idea of overcoming. And I will be his God, and he will be my son. But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, and as for murderers, fornicators, or sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. So when we talk about earth, we ultimately know all these things are going to be consumed. And when we talk about heaven, we know that thing is eternal, and that's the dwelling place of God. And that's what we have to focus our eyes on more than anything. All right, let's have a little application, food for thought here. Oftentimes we spend our health making a fortune and then spend our wealth trying to get our health back. I spend my best years working to try to get stuff. And when it's all said and done, I'm old, I can't even enjoy it. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to give it to somebody you don't like. That old son of yours is a daughter that's disrespectful and don't ever come by and visit. And now they going to Disney World on your dime. And you wanted to go the whole time, but you was too cheap, saving your money. See my point? Where is it at now? Where is it at now? I've seen that happen, truthfully. Number 2, some grew up. This is not my category, okay? I didn't grow up rough. I didn't. Some grew up with meager means. So as a result, they put too much value on net worth and not enough on spiritual worth. I'm going to make it a point never to have to do this again. We went out with some things and we did this right here. And let me tell you something. Oftentimes that person that says they had such a tough upbringing, the one constant that they had was each other and family. And you know the one thing you oftentimes forfeit in the pursuit of finer things? Family. Which is greater? I think we know the answer. Spiritual worth is eternal. The worm, the moth, and rust destroy the earthly, the physical. As a result, a person oftentimes ignores God throughout their daily routine in order to accumulate more money and stuff. I can't do this today. I would do this. I know I should be doing this, but man, I got to go do this. I signed up so I can do this. I got all these things that are vying for my time and my attention because I want X, Y, and Z. I was writing that article again, and I found it made me think of Richie Rich. Y'all remember the cartoon of Richie Rich? And Richie Rich, even the dog got rubies and diamonds on his little flea collar or whatever it is, man. Richie Rich balling, man. And then everything that they trying to get Richie Rich, and he always overcome. But Richie, he doing good, ain't he? Richie Rich, right? And as a kid, you see certain things, you see shows, you do all those things, and it influences you. And somehow, our psyche and our mind, we start to think that those spiritual things they're important, but these earthly things and their worth becomes more important. You cannot watch TV and all these other things and read these things and be inundated with it 24/7 and think it doesn't influence your judgment. It's just not true. And oftentimes we I myself teach our children certain things, but do we overemphasize one more than the other? Do we make them feel so long as you go on Sunday, all is well? All right, let's keep going. Boy, y'all looking at me like y'all finna throw something at me. I'm a nice guy most of the time, right? Food for thought. Are we often caught up in this world's view of success or the fear of losing it? I'll use myself as an example. Graduating high school, that's a given. That's what that's that right there. When I was coming up, if you went, no offense, my veterans, I'm just telling you the truth, right? If you went to the military, it's because you couldn't cut it with your books or you got in trouble. Anybody know what I'm talking about? You got in trouble, you got to go to the military. And you always had that one person at the office that's coming along. You're interested in this and this and this? Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But anyways, and so we viewed success and making it as climbing that educational ladder. I am not against education in one mean at all. I mean, education and hard work will help keep you out of poverty, okay, in most cases, all right? But sometimes we look more to the worldly education, secular education, and it has its place, and we put a higher premium on that than we do spiritual. What do you mean? I know derivatives. I know to take the base and multiply it by the up there and subtract the 1 minus the whatever it is. I forgot it now. I don't know it anymore. But you take x, the 1 up there minus 1, that gives you derivative. But anyways, I know all these things right here. I don't even know how many books of the Bible there are, let alone even be able to spell them. And I struggle to try to find the book of Hosea. But I can tell you everything about the Slam magazine. I can tell you everything about Vogue. I can tell you everything about LeBron James. I can tell you everything about what's the Rangers guy that retired that was real good, Michael Young. I can tell you everything about all those guys. What are we doing? We're putting the emphasis on the wrong thing. Beloved, this is one of the snares of the traps of the devil. And our children especially are being caught up into it. And that's the shame. That's what's so sad. Because oftentimes, when you get yourself in this predicament, and then you look back and you can see someone else doing the exact same thing. And it happens all too often. In order to be successful by the world standards, we have to spend a lot of time in the world. Where a man's treasure is, there is his what? There is his heart. You spend a lot of time on your treasure. You spend a lot of time thinking about that, meditating on that. How can I get this? Accumulating this, worrying over stocks and what they drop in this and so forth. Knowing that at the end of the day, it's going to all perish. All right? And Romans chapter 12, verse 2, Paul says, and be not conformed. Don't fit the mold. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed. The ugly caterpillar to the beautiful butterfly, monarch. Be transformed by the renewing of your what? Mind. That you may prove what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Spiritual. Spiritual. We're talking about spiritual things. I'm going to have to put a penknife in it. And what we'll do next time, the good Lord says the same, we're going to pick up at verse 21 and 22 where he says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Because that's the truth. Oftentimes, men and even women, we can neglect our spouse by trying to pursue things that we think will make her happy. Oh, man, you may as well tell the truth. You know, if I could just get her this right here, they say diamonds are a girl's best friend and a dog is man's best friend. One is more loyal than the other. You never heard that? Yeah, okay. Anyhow, it's the truth. For where your treasure is there. And then we're going to talk about verse 22. The eye is the lamp of the body. And how we have to make sure that we are seeing things with 20/20 spiritual vision, that we assign things the right value. That's what's most important. When we think of the Lord's Supper and what it is that we're doing, we are reflecting on what's most important, and that is our salvation and the cost of it. I pray, God, that we never forget the value of our conversion, of our believing in Christ and being baptized in that watery grave of baptism, coming up a new creation and going on forward, that we do everything we can to grow in it. All right. So the question, last slide, where is your treasure? Is it with God or is it with mammon? Where's your treasure? Look towards yourself, not on me. I opened up this morning and I told you about mine. I owned up to it. I make the resolve to strive to do better. What about you? What about you? What about you? You got to look yourself in the mirror and say, can I honestly say this right here? When I consider the bulk of my time, my energy, my efforts, my thoughts My thoughts, are they spiritual? Or are they on mammon, material? I hope, trust, and pray that I've said something to encourage you, something to cause you to think and to reflect about the great gift of salvation and the ultimate confident expectation of heaven to be with God on high. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. Without faith, it's impossible to please him. The Corinthians heard that gospel message that a Savior died for men, for their sins to atone. They believed it, and they were baptized accordingly. So, Acts 18:8. Need the prayers of the church? Whatever way we can help, we'll give you that opportunity as together we stand, sing a song for your encouragement.